before Charles Oliveira was the king of finishes, before he was known as the UFC's submission artist, and way before he lifted UFC gold over his head in a packed arena. He was broken. 10 times. These weren't just losses, they were reminders, painful, public reminders, that greatness isn't given, it's earned, usually through pain. Each of Charles Oliveira's 10 losses wasn't just a step backward, they were moments that threatened to end his career entirely. But somehow, every time, he got back up. So today, we're breaking down every single loss in Oliveira's career, from the brutal finishes and quick taps to the controversial fights and moments that nearly made him quit the sport for good. Let's begin at the very start. 1. Jim Miller, December 2010. The first fall. Charles Oliveira's UFC career started fast. At just 20 years old, he had already racked up an 11-0 record with 2 UFC wins by finish. People were buzzing. A new phenom was here, but then came Jim Miller, a veteran, calm, dangerous. Within 2 minutes, Miller caught Oliveira in a knee bar. It was clean, clinical, and over. Just like that, the hype train came to a screeching halt. Oliveira had never tasted defeat before, and it hit hard. He tapped quickly. Some called it smart. Others called it weak. But what no one could deny, the prodigy had been exposed. 2. Donald Cerrone, August 2011. The body shot collapse. Not even a year after the Miller loss, Oliveira stepped in against Donald "Cowboy" Cerrone. This fight wasn't just a setback, it was a reality check. Oliveira looked sharp early. He was fast, aggressive, and throwing combos. But Cerrone? He stayed patient. Then it happened. Cerrone landed a crushing body shot that folded Oliveira in half. He followed it up with knees and ground and pound, and the ref had no choice but to wave it off. It was brutal. The kind of TKO that makes you question everything. And for Oliveira? The questions were starting to pile up. 3. Cub Swanson, September 2012. The one-punch, a KO. Now riding back-to-back losses, Oliveira needed a rebound win. Instead, he got Cub Swanson. The fight started fast, with Oliveira trying to set the pace. But less than halfway through the first round, Swanson uncorked a clean overhand right that sent Oliveira crashing to the mat. No ground game, no comeback, just a highlight reel knockout. It was Charles's third UFC loss, and now the narrative was shifting. From next big thing to maybe he's just not that guy. 4. Frankie Edgar, July 2013. The outclassing. This fight wasn't a finish, but it might have been more telling than any KO. Frankie Edgar, a former champion, was looking to climb back up the ranks. Charles was trying to prove he still belonged. What followed was 3 rounds of domination. Edgar's movement, speed, and pressure completely nullified Oliveira's offense. Charles landed some shots but never came close to threatening. It was a clean, unanimous decision win for Edgar, and for Oliveira, another setback. And the whispers started again. He's got talent, but not the toughness. 5. Max Holloway, August 2015, the injury that stopped everything. 2 years later, Oliveira had strung together some wins. He looked sharper, more experienced, and ready to test himself against top competition again. Then came Max Holloway. Fans were hyped. It was a classic striker versus submission artist matchup. But what unfolded was one of the strangest moments in UFC history. Just 90 seconds into the fight, Oliveira grimaced, backed up, and dropped to the mat holding his neck. No punch, no takedown, just pain. Later, doctors revealed it was a torn esophagus, a bizarre and dangerous injury. The fight was ruled a TKO loss. And though it wasn't a beating, the headlines didn't care. Oliveira had quit again, they said. The reputation was solidifying. Fragile, mentally weak, a quitter. 6. Anthony Pettis, August 2016. The big opportunity blown. After recovering from injury, Oliveira was given a massive chance, a co-main event fight against former lightweight champ Anthony Pettis. This was it, the redemption moment. Charles looked incredible in round one. He was aggressive, initiating takedowns and hunting for submissions. But in the third round, Pettis caught him with a deep guillotine choke, and once again, Oliveira tapped. It wasn't that he was being destroyed, he was competitive. But in those key moments when it really mattered, he kept breaking. This was starting to look like a pattern, and fans were losing hope. 7. Ricardo Lamas, November 2016. The weight miss disaster. Less than 3 months later, just 76 days to be exact, Oliveira accepted another fight. This time against Ricardo Lamas. And it was a disaster from the start. Oliveira missed weight by almost 10 pounds. His body looked drained. He was weak, slow, and Lamas took full advantage. After a short back and forth, Lamas locked in a guillotine choke and forced the tap. Again. But the real damage wasn't the submission, it was the narrative. Charles Oliveira was now seen as reckless, unprofessional, and undisciplined. 8. Paul Felder, December 2017. The beating that changed everything. 1 year later came the loss that changed Charles forever. Paul Felder was a tough, violent striker, not someone you wanted to be underneath on the mat. Charles started strong, threatening with submissions and even taking Felder's back. But when Felder escaped, it was pure violence. He unleashed a flurry of elbows, slicing through Charles' defense and forcing the ref to step in. This wasn't a quick tap. It was a beatdown, and it pushed Oliveira to the brink. By this point, he had 8 UFC losses and had bounced between featherweight and lightweight. He wasn't ranked. He wasn't talked about. He was almost gone. But instead of breaking, he changed. After this loss, Charles reinvented himself. He cleaned up his diet, found consistency, and for the first time, stayed in one division. What happened next would shock the world. 9. Islam Makhachev, October 2022. The crown taken. Let's fast forward. After the Felder loss, Oliveira went on a tear. He rattled off 11 wins in a row, including finishes over Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. He became champion. He was feared. But he lost his belt on the scale, missing weight against Gaethje, and had to fight Islam Makhachev to reclaim it. What followed was one of the most one-sided performances against Oliveira in years. Islam dropped him, outgrappled him, and in round 2, submitted the submission king. It was crushing. For years, Charles had been the man no one wanted to face, but Islam walked through him with calm precision. It wasn't just a loss, it was a changing of the guard. 10th. Arman Tsarukyan, April 2024. The next generation takes over. And finally, his most recent loss. Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan wasn't explosive, but it was revealing. Arman, a young, hungry contender, used pace, pressure, and relentless wrestling to edge out a split decision win. Charles had moments. He almost pulled off a submission. But the fight showed something else. Time catches up with everyone. This wasn't the Charles Oliveira of 2021. This was a grizzled vet, still dangerous, but slowing down. And in that cage, the next generation announced its arrival. 10 losses. Each one was different. Some fast, some violent, some subtle, some bizarre. But all of them taught Charles Oliveira one thing. You don't need to be undefeated to be legendary. In fact, it's the scars that make the story. Because Charles isn't great because he never lost. He's great because he kept going anyway. And now, even with 10 defeats, he's still one of the most feared lightweights on the planet. Because every time you count him out, he comes back sharper, hungrier, and more dangerous than ever. So the question isn't, how many times has Charles Oliveira lost? The real question is, how many more times will he rise?